Christian, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited to have you on. We've been able to touch offline, and I've had some time to really look into the work you and your team are doing. And I think it will provide a lot of value to the audience, and I'm sure I will take a lot out of it. And we talked about here before even hitting record. There's a lot of missing information out there, and often people are gravitating towards what they see in the media or what they're being told, not necessarily having that due diligence, which I think can be really helpful. I know it's helped me guide in terms of guiding me and making better informed decisions, but I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of that. However, before we jump into any of that, I do want to give you an opportunity to share with the listeners a little bit about yourself, what it is that you do, and what's brought you here today.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the introduction and I look forward to the conversation. So, a little bit about me. I'm a husband, father of six. I am a entrepreneur for the last, I don't know, 18 years now, about 20, I guess, pretty much just hanging my own shingle and doing my thing. And so I could be described as a health coach, but that for a lot of people, they don't know what that means or they don't have a frame of reference for how broad I can help. So, short version is I've started as a nutritionist, personal trainer, worked in the health and wellness field, had different locations. We had about 10,000 square feet. We put together a holistic wellness team and chiropractic and acupuncture and massage and naturopathy and personal training and group fitness and a lot of different modalities in one roof. So I got to see the health world very holistically from a practitioner standpoint. And then as time went by, I started realizing these humans are complicated. We have different feelings and emotions and motivation fluctuations. And sometimes we don't even understand what's driving our own behavior. And so that really led me into more the psychological realm and the mental, emotional, even spiritual realm, trying to understand what is human nature? What is it that motivates us to action? And so in 2017, we switched from brick and mortar to virtual. And my wife and I have run a personal coaching business for, I guess, the last 7 years or so. And we have recently partnered with other doctors and coaches more specifically to focus on the problem of toxicity. And we've broadened the definition of toxicity to be mental, emotional toxicity and microbial imbalances that can be toxic or just chemical toxicity. We're very much interested in the upstream reasons why people are sick rather than the tired old try to figure out what the symptoms are and how to treat them. And it's much easier to create a breakthrough for somebody in their health if you can cut off what's actually poisoning them and you can find the roots of illness and uproot them. Man, it's remarkable how the body can heal. So
Mm.
that's a very quick version of, I don't know, last 20 years of what I've been up to, but there you have it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I do want to come back to a lot of the stuff you've touched on, toxicity, but just curious, how has it been working with your wife and having a business together? Because for a lot of people, that could be daunting, and a lot of the times people need that space from each other. But I'm
Hmm.
curious to understand how you guys have been able to make it work and what kind of advice you would offer to couples that are looking to do that. And I think that's
Hmm.
something that's happening a lot where people who are going into the entrepreneurial space find that it's often better to work with your spouse and bring different strengths to the table. So I'm curious to understand how you guys have been able to manage it.
Yeah, I'm happy to say we're still married, so that's a good thing. We have figured out how to coexist and manage and share the load. So there's obviously, from being an entrepreneur or anybody that's ever tried that, getting married, being an entrepreneur, or parenting are three of the fastest ways to have all of your inadequacies or your lack of development in an area, your insecurities, your fears, and where you may be a little selfish, thrown up in your face on the
Mhm.
regular. And with enough time, and you learn to stand under that weight, and you learn to be able to say, I'm not perfect. And there's a humility that starts to fill your shoes or that becomes part of who you are. And
Mhm.
in the effort to be an entrepreneur that's also married, who has a wife that's, for whether or not she wants to be, she's hitched with me on this journey.
Mm.
And sure, at times it's challenging, but what it really has done is brought us closer together. And somebody told me years ago, if you want to be successful at anything, ask women.
Mm.
And man, I'm so glad I heard that because it's made life so much easier. That basically what it means is, Christian, you don't know everything, and double check with your wife first, and then as many times as you can get women to weigh in on things. But basically, more minds weighing in on what you're trying to do. And as she and I have put our swords down from time to time, we have closed our eyes a little bit to maybe where the other person doesn't, if we don't, they don't see us as much, or where we don't feel like the, because we have 6 kids, so sharing the load between entrepreneurhood. We also homeschool, and then the day to run the home. There's a lot to do.
Mhm.
And recognizing that the other person is always trying, recognizing that the other person is doing their best. And sometimes there may be a day where I have to make up more of the deficit or where she has to make up more of the
Mhm.
deficit. Or we also had a systems level think on what runs our home and where we enlist our kids as productive members of the family rather than just more mouths to feed who can sit back and we take care of everything. We want to raise competent kids.
Mhm.
And so part of that was being able to say, how do we run the system of the home? How do we have each other's back? How do we match our strengths and weaknesses together? And so over the years, we've found our way and we can be remarkably productive when we put our heads together. And I can say it's a full life, but it's a very sweet one.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for also building on that. So yeah, let's maybe jump into it. So you mentioned the background in being in the health and wellness side, having that holistic approach to
Hmm.
people's wellness, but then you found this niche around toxicity. How do you
Hmm.
arrive from that holistic approach to then focusing on toxicity? And then we'll obviously talk about the different layers that you've
Yeah, yeah.
identified there, but how did you make that transition and what allowed you to identify that as something to go after in supporting and helping people?
What I realized over the years, and maybe I'm slow on the uptake, but what I figured out was almost every health condition we have, we pick a Greek or Latin name for it, but what we're naming is the symptom.
Mm,
And so little, it's shocking that this is the way it is, but so little in the world of health, that's medical and alternative, actually goes and looks for root causes. And I don't think you can have an honest assessment of where we are. Let's just stick with the US as a nation. We are the most obese nation in the world. 42.5% of us are obese, which doesn't count overweight. You put that in the mix, and it's about three-quarters of the population is excessive in their weight. And then you look at chronic disease. And from the 1930s, it was about 7%. Now it's 6 out of 10 people have a chronic health condition. There's nothing that can explain that clearly without toxicity. It's not that humans in the 30s, we just suddenly all developed laziness and stopped caring. And this thing is just unfolded and how that's how we got here. We've been poisoned for the last several decades. And if you couple that with mental emotional toxicity, you couple
mhm,
that with the gross for those of you who are on these, I'm sorry, but the medications for psych meds, the
mhm,
medications for the head, what that has also done is it has in many ways killed our want to. It has medicated us into this numb state where we don't feel things. And because I can't feel anymore, my drive is tempered. And so I don't even try as hard. So it's almost
mhm,
like it's amplified it. But what we've stepped back and said is, where in the world is this problem coming from? And what got us into this was trying to help people who had adverse events from the COVID shots and we started looking at what's in these things. Just last month in the Journal of what was it, Vaccine Theory and Practice and Research, they said there was 55 undeclared chemicals found in these shots in the top
mhm.
6 brands, which is like 9 ingredients per shot that's not even on the label. So when you're talking about detox, what you're saying is, what in the world are we trying to detox from? There's been 80,000 chemicals made in the last 100 years. So you tell me what we're trying to detox from.
Yeah.
And then you throw the complexity of the person in the mix and their age and gender and weight and where they live and what they're exposed to and how much hope they have are all relevant. There's no one thing, but what's common is human biology and human nature.
Mhm,
And what's common is the body knows how to get these things out. There's no chemistry equation that's going to handle that level of complexity, but the human body can do it. And if we can teach it to clean itself out and we can empower it with the habits and the tools it needs to repair and give it patience so it can do that, it's shocking how much the body can heal. Just about anything you can imagine. And what focus on toxicity has done for us is allowed us to say, geesh, there's so few things we can't help
mhm.
because we're not worried about the biochemical whack-a-mole that the rest of the world's stuck in or one modality. The only one I have is this modality, so everything looks like a nail. I'm
Mhm.
just going to whack it with my hammer. When we let go of that and we said the body's the healer, it knows how to purge and it knows how to heal. All we have to do is step back and do that. That's why our breadth of testimonies or breadth of different things we can help people with has picked up. And what the last 7+ years have taught me is I have got to help people deal with the mental, emotional, spiritual toxins.
Mhm.
If that's poisoning you, it's really hard to heal a broken body if you still have a broken heart.
Yeah.
And so we've blended that. And gosh, it's profound when you can heal somebody's story and their body. Wow. So that's our expanded definition of toxicity.
Mm,
But that's how we really pigeonholed into this work, because it started with just the adverse events from the shots. And it led us to saying, because it brought down the walls between disciplines.
Mhm.
Coaches were used to be the cute, oh, you guys aren't smart enough for medical school. Let us handle it. And if we need you. And COVID changed that because
Mhm.
not all of them, but a lot of doctors were humbled
Mhm.
and they realized their profession was weaponized. And
Mhm.
they realized that we've been sold a bag of goods.
Mhm.
And the ones who were willing to metabolize that were humble enough to say, maybe I should look more broadly at other disciplines. Maybe what I've been doing my whole career has been treating people instead of helping people heal.
Mhm.
And so those are the people I've been able to find. And it's fun. I've never had this much fun helping people get well because I have a team of people and our skill sets complement each other so
Mhm.
well. And I can reach out to people and do podcasts or interviews or have off the record conversations
Mhm.
and just say, what do you think about this, that, and the other? And wow, we can the many minds make light loads. It's so much easier because none of us are expecting to have all the answers,
Right.
but together we're all smarter than we are individually.
Mhm. Yes. And as you were sharing, a couple of personal things that come to the forefront for me also, I did an complete episode on just the COVID vaccine
Mm,
and some of the potential risks and how there was a lack of information and lack of due diligence around testing and seeing side effects. And YouTube blocked that episode. So I thought I was
they did.
shocked.
Yeah.
But so that kind of leads me into a couple of themes here. So you talked about Western medicine, and the other piece there is I feel often, at least in Canada, because we have free healthcare, doctors are often bogged down. There's a lot of controversy around incentives for prescribing medication, and then focus, as you mentioned, strictly on the root cause, sorry, the lack of focus on the root cause, but just looking at symptoms. There's a lot going on here, and then there's a
Mhm.
lot of money involved, as you can appreciate. What are your thoughts around that, where people are often fed the toxicity because it is a big financial industry, and how do you break that down?
Depends on the person and how willing they are to have a history lesson. But the short version is you could rewind back to the medical licensing laws in the late 1800s, or really the watershed moment was the Flexner Report in 1910,
Mm.
which was basically a group of monopolists got together and they said, how do we take over healthcare? And they American on the American people loose the idea that the only medicine that could possibly be worth anything is scientific, and it's got to be to borrow from Standard Oil, which was the Rockefeller model. Now we have Standard Oil applied to pills, and there's a
Mhm.
pill for every ill. But what it really was at its core was just a monopolistic attempt to take over. And the motto of monopolists is competition is evil. So they systematically stomped out everything that wasn't quote unquote scientific. And so that means they've claimed for themselves the title conventional. They have created legislative and linguistic handcuffs for everybody. So if you don't fall in line and be a good little boy or girl, you don't follow the quote standard of care, and you play with the right words and you follow the right protocols and you build the right CPT code with the insurance, we can take your job away. You'll come before the licensing board and we will strip you, and your insurance will no longer cover you. And so they basically got doctors in prisons. They have to be good little lemmings to stay in that system. And so most of that's hard to get somebody to not see something when your paycheck depends upon you not seeing it.
Mhm.
So many of them, not necessarily because they want to, they can feel the ethical rub or the ooiness of that sometimes. But it's like, how do I have to feed my family? I can't lose. If there's whether it's ego or money or whatever mixed up in that, it's a system that is not looking out for you. It is strictly looking out to make customers for life. The motto of the medical system, you could argue, is a patient cured is a customer lost.
Mhm.
It's not really looking to help people heal. It's looking to manage your symptoms indefinitely into the future and keep you as a customer.
Mhm.
So, which that's a rapid fire for people if that's new to you, and it may be the first time you've heard that the medical system may not have your back or may not actually be looking for root causes. But if we can be honest, that's what the system is. And that's why the alternative world has started in the last couple decades has really started to find its sea legs again.
Mhm.
And it's so easy to point out the reactionary nature of Western medicine. It's great at trauma and emergency, best in the world. Everything else, it stinks
Mhm.
because it's not trying to get us well. It's literally using the three main tools are cut, burn, and poison.
Mhm.
Medications, scalpels, and radiation. Those are the only tools that Western medicine really has when you get past all the fancy testing. And it's a shame that's the way we think of it conventionally. But if we can let go of that idea and we can say, what are the wrong turns that we made? What
Mhm.
could I do for my health? And realize that there is going to be big money and big interests like you experienced with YouTube shutting you down if you get out of line. That's what doctors have been in the whole time. And now the rest of us are just finding out they're serious about maintaining their monopoly such that they will pull the microphone on anybody who doesn't say the right thing.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And another thread to pick up on, and the reason why I want to talk about this, because there's a lot of overlap. You touched on the whole prescribing medication for the mind and how that just numbs everyone out. They're not able to actually feel their emotions. I earlier this year I started working in the addiction space, and I'm super grateful for it because it's brought a lot of things to the forefront for me, some of the things I'm trying to escape or avoid. But essentially I see similarities there, even with if you're taking medication for mental health disorders or whatever you think you're going through and you've been prescribed something. It's the same idea in the addiction space where people are just trying to escape the difficult emotions, the fear of just being vulnerable. And then you tend to try to connect through whatever substance you pick up or whatever behavior it is that you're engaging in. And now I see this all around me. It's one of those things, right? Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I was at a sporting event a couple of nights ago, and that's it. It's just loud music, bright lights, people just numbed out on alcohol, and just, yeah, it's just, there's not a lot of presence there. And I think that's where I see the spiritual growth has been halted, and then to your point, that's where I believe we're taking in a lot of these mental and emotional toxins. But I want to get your thoughts on all of that. And do you see similarities there as well?
Oh man, yeah, on all of that would take me a long time. There's so many things I want to say.
Yeah.
But yes, a couple of things that were running through my head as you were talking. There's the book for anybody who doesn't understand the history of the psychiatry industry, the book by Robert Whitaker called The Anatomy of an Epidemic, which just lays out the entire history of the psychiatry industry. And more or less the short version, it's faux science. It was the psychiatry industry trying to have the same esteem that the rest of the medical industry does. And at the end of it, he's analyzed all the medications, all the studies, and what you're left with is this whole thing is a sham and it's not really helping people or has very insignificant evidence of help that probably should just start over.
Mhm.
But one thing I read this year that was super enlightening was the book Bad Therapy by Abigail Schreier. And if you haven't heard that, she's the same one that wrote Irreversible Damage about trans movement. Have you read that Bad Therapy?
No, I'm
Oh,
familiar with her work.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it's remarkable. One of the big things she highlights is the disservice we have done in the therapy world and how we have more or less shut down people's growth. We've stunted them by taking away the life experiences that build resilience. And we've become this snowflake generation. And we can't, when mom and dad have to go with us to our interviews, and then we're so nervous that we have any skills because we've never had to test ourselves and try hard things. And about the only vestige we have left in the culture that has any sort of hat tip toward the benefit of hard work is exercise. Like, okay, I can see how that's helpful, but we've developed this allergy to struggle, and struggle is what improves us. And if we don't have to go work out our philosophies, if we don't have to go refine people skills to have friends, if we don't have to struggle to pass a test or compete in a sport, or one of the things she highlights in that book that was called social emotional learning and the gigantic disservice that is. I used to think of therapy as anywhere from just useless to really helpful. She's
Mhm.
expanded it to the left of weaponized and egregiously harmful to neutral to helpful. And the majority of what we experience culturally, because it's infiltrated the school system, is weaponized healthcare where you just get kids to marinate all day and how bad they feel. And now they're like one upping each other and comparing who's on the worst meds and who's got the worst situation.
Right.
And I got all these suicidal friends. And it's just, we've anchored our culture to dithering and to hopelessness.
Mhm.
And we're now starting to reap the fruit of intervening and trying to protect a generation of kids from anything hard. And that is such a disservice to us. So, anyway, there's several other themes I could pick up on, but I'll give you the mic back.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree with you because I worked in the not for profit last year, and all the clients I was seeing were basically like science experiments. Their doctors had prescribed them every medication you can think of to deal with whether it was ADHD or anxiety or depression. And a lot of the times the symptoms overlap. So then the doctors are just experimenting, and they can't feel any emotions. And obviously it's affecting their baseline functioning. And then there's other impacts that take place, and we don't know even till now, what's going on in the chemistry of the brain and the body. Yeah, I see a lot of negative impacts there. And to your point, we're not telling people that it's okay if you're experiencing difficult emotions. It's okay that you're struggling. How can we give you tools to navigate these things rather than saying you shouldn't be feeling this, right? And that resilience, as you touched on, is so important. I know if I hadn't had experiences early in life where I had to struggle and build that resiliency, I wouldn't be able to deal with a lot of situations that come up in adult life. We all
Yeah.
have difficult situations and stress will hit us. But if you don't have that resiliency, how are you going to navigate this life? And I see this with my own son, right? And I
Mhm.
try to teach it to him, if he's losing in a game, this willingness or tendency to give up, be like, oh,
Yeah.
this is too hard. And I'm like, this is life. And if you don't build that resilience now, you're not going to have a lot of it as you grow up because you
Yeah,
haven't
well,
built that muscle.
and it's even worse than that because it's not just a lack of resilience. Part of what the therapy world today is doing is creating victimhood
Yes.
and blame shifting. And it's telling people if anything has offended you, it's the other person's fault. And it's estranging kids from parents, even within their elementary years, never mind junior high school. And it's teaching people that everything else that's happening in the world is someone else's fault and it's not you and you don't have to change. And the best thing to do sometimes is cut off these toxic people in your life. It does nothing to say, turn the mirror on yourself and let's see where maybe you're contributing to this or where it's a mix of two people who are talking past each other and haven't learned to understand each other. And it's just a flattening out of our basic people skills. Never mind, please, thank you, and I'm sorry. It's we can't get past that.
Right.
When now we're stuck, we don't even know how to relate to somebody who's offended us,
Hmm.
other than just cutting them off because our therapist told them to.
Hmm.
And that's it's such a disservice to a whole generation that if you can't get out of that, you're how in the world are you gonna get into building
Right.
resilience and trying hard things? It's
Yeah. Well,
you're estranging yourself from the most important people in your life when you
right.
do that.
And I know we touched on it in a way where if you put out content that could be controversial or may challenge conventional wisdom, but in general, this whole notion that if someone disagrees with you, there's a problem and you can block the information or you can cancel them, whatever the case may be. And I think it's good to be challenged because it allows you
Yeah.
to, like you said earlier, even with the relationship you have with your wife, you can identify your blind spots or you can just change the way you think if you have been able to take in more information that may not be something that you would have thought about previously. I see a lot of these issues, and I think a lot of this does overlap, I'm assuming, with what you would consider mental and emotional toxins. So
Yeah,
let's
it sure does.
expand on that. Like, what is going on here, and how is it impacting people's well being? It is obvious, but
Mhm.
let's maybe dive into that a little bit in terms of what are some of these other mental and emotional toxins, so in addition to what we've already talked about, but how is it affecting people's well-being on top of the inability to have resilience or just face difficult situations?
Yeah, there's several short answers, like a negative thought lowers your immune system.
Mhm.
Why is it doing that? And there's a great book called The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton, who really just geeks out and it's more academic than it is practical sometimes. But it's a look at how profoundly our thoughts literally dictate responses by our body. They dictate what chemical messengers our body will send, what processes get turned on and off. And he would say your results in life are maybe 2% genetic and they're about 98% what you think. And there's the belief that then translates into literal physical things. And so some of the most difficult or weighty emotional toxins that I deal with people on the regular it's related to their storytelling.
Mm.
It's the story they tell themselves about who they are and their place in the world and what other people are thinking. It's typically in that. And the most poisonous stories are those of inadequacy. Who am I to try? I don't have what it takes. I'm not good enough. Or it's unworthiness. Even if I was good enough, I'm not worth the effort. And it's life often beats people down and makes them feel that way, whether they're overlooked or dismissed or they're unimportant and taken for granted. There's a lack of dignity that a lot of people suffer with. And it is that feeling of not being worth it and other people are always more important and who am I to try or the lack of purpose. And that gets really to the meta narrative of life. If you want to answer the most difficult questions of where do you think this whole thing came from and where is it going? And if you don't have something to sink your teeth into that says, back to our conversation of resilience, that struggle's worth the effort, you're going to get stuck in the loop of why bother? Who cares? What's the point? And those thoughts are also toxic. They're keeping you from trying, just the same as I'm not worth it or I don't have what it takes can do that. And really, those are the three biggest ones I find. I'm not unworthiness, inadequacy, and lack of purpose.
Mhm.
And most of the time, I can surgically get there with a few questions to see if that. And so it's not like they're mutually exclusive either. Somebody could have all three of them. But when you recognize that those are the deep wounds, those are the things we fear the most. I'm not worth it as a proxy for I don't belong, right? I'm not even worth being in their presence.
Mhm.
And estrangement from people where we belong is such a fearful thing, but that poisons our outcome because we'll do anything possible to cut off estrangement or something that makes us anxious.
Mhm.
And so one of the easiest things to keep you from being afraid is never try anything. Just don't put yourself out there. Don't flex the muscle of resilience because you might be a failure rather than seeing that episode. Maybe you failed at something, but it was an event, not a label. And so pointing out, I've pointed out what I call the difference between a limiting belief and a poisonous belief.
Mm.
Limiting, because I didn't know that was an option. Who knew you could get fish at a steakhouse? Oh, you just didn't know. But a poisonous belief is one that poisons your effort. It poisons your self identity
Mm.
and has you take on something that your heavenly Father would not say is true. Like, no, that's not how this world is or how I see you. And your worth is not found in those things or completing enough things on a to-do list. No, it's found somewhere else.
Right.
And if people can let that sink into their heart of hearts, it really does change everything. And you've cut off the upstream toxin, the mental emotional toxin that prevents them from trying, is poisoning their biology. And then the body has this I had one client say, "Man, hope has been so good for my energy." Like,
Mhm.
yeah, because you know who you are now. You're not wrestling and stuck in some a really crappy story that was self-inflicted or other people imposed and you believed it and didn't let go of it. You're not reasoning from the maturity of a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old anymore, living by those old rules. You can look back at it as an adult and that was something that happened to you, not because of you.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of different themes within that, but those are some of the easiest, most predictable answers to what are the upstream emotional or mental toxins that people get stuck in. And then it's just often questions and upgrading the story to truthful, hopeful, life-giving ones is the path out of that.
Mhm. Yeah, and what I've noticed, very similar to what you pointed out, is you get caught in that loop, right? And it's hard
Mhm.
to get yourself off. And along the lines of, I'm a firm believer, and there's obviously a lot of people who state this, but often your thoughts and belief then create your reality, right?
Yeah.
You're going to invite similar people in, you're going to have similar situations, and that just is reinforcing your beliefs. So that's where you're caught in that loop.
Yeah.
Now, to your point, sometimes you need to step out of it and have hope, have some positivity, have a purpose, something that gives you meaning in life that you can work towards. So we've talked through that piece, but there's also the other piece we touched on lately, and I think it's important to bring that in as well to tie the two together is the chemical toxins, right?
Yeah.
And people will then have the mental and emotional toxins, and then they'll have the chemical toxins, and now you're in a real bind. And
Right.
how do you even get out of that? And this is where I've seen in the addiction space, the two are feeding each other, right? So
Yeah.
you're having these negative feelings and you want to escape them. So you're then engaging in behaviors or substance abuse to avoid feeling those difficult emotions. And then you get stuck there. So
Yeah.
help us understand the chemical toxin piece. And then how are you helping people work through that as well?
Yeah, so one of the things we did when we realized this puzzle of helping people who took the vaccine that have been injured and we don't know what's in them, we had to step back and say, okay, what do we need to get out of the body? And the short answer is anything that poisons it. So, what poisons the body? So, thoughts was just one of 6 things. And when we realized there are natural substances, those are your venoms and tick bites or snakes or whatever, there are non natural substances. That's the 80,000 plus synthetic chemicals that are new to nature that have been invented and don't have to be proven safe. They have to be proven unsafe. And so that's your DDTs and your thalidomide and medications is in that. I don't know if people know that, but all medications are toxic. That's if you take one aspirin, your headache might go away. You take too many and you die
Mhm.
because it's just a little bit of poison. And so medications are in there, household cleansers, our personal care products, our lawn products, industrial chemicals, they're everywhere. Plastics, we have jet fuel raining down from the sky in terms of heavy metals, let alone your theory whether or not they're actually spraying stuff. That's a whole different conversation. But there's so many categories, but they're not is complex in the getting them out, which is the beautiful part. So when you think about whether it's medications, whether it's inventorying, food is the other big place they come in. So the food industry, there's thousands of whether they're coloring chemicals or flavoring agents. By the way, if you see natural flavors on a label, it's not natural. It's a chemical approximation of something that they might find in nature. So it's the seed oils, it is the MSG and the corn syrup and on through. We're from birth to grave, we're bombarded with it. And so it's impossible to find anybody you could test on the world who does not have heavy metals and plastics and glyphosate and other toxins in their food because it rains from the sky because we farm with it
Mm.
and it's in the water. And then there's microbes. That's the other big one. So in all of us, we're outnumbered about 10 to 1 by the microbes that live in us. Most of them are symbiotic. They're here for a mutually beneficial purpose. And they should eat your food and poop nutrients. But there's a lot of microbes that eat your food and poop toxins.
Mm.
And if you have a parasite infection, those things, they can be little microscopic things you need a microscope to see, or they can be worms that are many feet long. And they eat the majority of your nutrients and they can rob your body from being able to receive the nutrition you do eat. And when they die, when they eat your food and poop toxins, or when they die, think of like roadkill on the side of the road in a hot day, they burst open, spill their innards inside you. It's a controlled explosion, right? But that's in you now. And so as they lay eggs and reproduce in your body, you're just continually poisoning yourself. So the need to get those out, and along with there's obviously the mental stuff. But okay, sometimes it's a chicken or egg. Do you get the person hopeful first, or do you get their gut cleaned up and then they have the energy to face the heavy things? It could go either way. But we've just said let's go after both. Let's make sure we have programs and systems or coaching available for them as they go through this, whichever part of the journey they're dealing with. And sometimes the toxic elimination brings up a Herx response, and that can be emotional because my gut, my headache, I'm feeling worse. Am I okay? And what's happening? And so we've just said, let's just make sure that we can cover both ends of it. But if you realize it's a fairly short list of things that could poison us, it's microbes, it's heavy metals, it's natural substances, non-natural substances, and thoughts.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I can work with that. That becomes it. Health got so much simpler, and we're not stuck oversimplifying it now, trying to tell everyone it's about this one hormone. If you get this hormone balanced, or if you get this one microbe taken care of, or if you can just make sure that your pH is balanced, or you get the macros. That's what most of the health world is. And we've slowly been able to get back and be like, those are all either partial answers or way oversimplified, really good marketing, but they're not the solution.
Mhm.
And it's just been fun to say, you know what, let's fix the actual problem. The other big reason our health breaks down is malnutrition.
Mhm.
And that's a whole different conversation about what the heck happened to our food supply.
Right.
But you get people cleaned out and nourished, and sure enough, healing and hope and purpose and vigor is yours again. And you just have to be willing you have to find the resilience to go through a process to clean you out and have the patience to heal. And that's pretty much any age. The older you are, the longer it takes, but it's never impossible. You just have to step back and, okay, what would it look like in this scenario? And that makes health and healing a lot more fun for us.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just to expand on the whole gut issue, because that's something that I've really spent a lot of time understanding. And there's not a lot of information out there, unfortunately. And the food that actually supports your gut health is also not easily accessible. And often it's the opposite, right? The stuff that's easily accessible is the stuff that's doing the most damage. So, why do you think that's the case? And why is there not enough information out there? Even the book I read and some of the research I did, they're like, yeah, like the medical doctors are not preaching this, and we get chastised for putting this information out there. So, why is there so much going full circle here, misinformation or missing information around some of these things that are actually suited for our well being, especially when it comes to our gut health?
Okay, yeah. So there's a couple different levels at which to answer that. The easiest and somewhat lazy answer. It's not. I don't say lazy that there's no truth in it, but it's an oversimplified answer. It's just greed.
Hmm.
And so there's the simplistic answer that there's greedy corporations and they just want to make profit and they don't care about people and they don't if they have to poison them to they get people to take their food or take their medications or whatever. They'll just do it. And that falls apart to some extent when you realize that they're aware they're doing it and they have no intention of stopping. And not only are they paying to keep it going, but they delight in keeping it going.
Mhm,
And there's a psychopathy, or being a psychopath is a real pathology.
mhm,
It's not a made up thing. And it's so unrelatable to the vast majority of us to think that there's people out there that really just delight in human suffering,
mhm,
and they like poisoning people. And there's way too many of us in the world. And it's okay to depopulate. Like, those people still exist. It's not some relic from Hitler's Germany. Those people have weaseled their way into levers of power, and they're high functioning narcissistic psychopaths who don't really care about me and you. And what they can satisfy their desire for money because they have all of it and there's nothing they can't buy.
mhm,
But what they haven't satisfied and couldn't ever satisfy is there's always another angle where you can have more power and you
mhm,
can demonstrate the power you have to tell people what to do and to take over the world and shoehorn the way or the world into the way you think it should work. And it's just this ongoing mission, multi-generational effort to try to instill a one world government and really gross dystopian future that we've read about in so many
mhm.
dystopian novels or movies. Like that, those stories or those ideas came from somewhere,
Right.
and it's from sick people who think that's the way the world should work. And so, on top of the greed, when you can get past that and realize, oh, that's uncomfortable, but if we can pretend it's not there and wish it away, but that won't work. Or we can face it and bring some sunlight to that, because that's the last thing these people want is sunlight. And their biggest fear is irrelevance. And so, if we can give that to them by saying, we're not going to participate in your systems anymore, and you can't arrest all of us. And so, go pound sand if you don't like it, that we're not going to eat your bugs. We're not going to eat your crappy food, and we're not going to take your medications anymore. And heck, we're not even going to use your currency anymore. So, there's a bigger conversation about if somebody really wants to go to the why. It's easy to demonstrate, and they've worked really hard to click that into place so they can get their gross kicks on thinking they can tell the rest of us what to do.
Yeah.
But once you get past that, ooh, that's part of how the world works, and yeah, you tell off, and you're like, I'm gonna go make a difference. At least I have a map of reality to help me navigate and not be blindsided that these kind of gross things happen. And is greed part of our a life? Of course, like that's just you. It's not hard to find that, but there's something deeper than that. And
Mhm,
if we accept it, it's easier to face it. And then comes back to gut health, right? So our visceral reaction to that level of malice or that level of dismissiveness of human suffering that people would do, that can create a sour stomach, right? That can we can recognize that the toxins they feed us feed the microbes we don't want in our gut. So us able to cut off that input of their attempt to shackle our lives, that cutting off that input of the food and medicine that they purport is for our own good, and get rid of that is part of healing your gut. And so when it gets to the practical, tactical level, it's actually not as hard to heal the gut as you think. You got to clean it out. You got to put in the right things to scrape it out. And then once it's clean, you put back in the things that rebuild a microbiome. Are you ever going to eradicate every last cell of bacteria of something you don't want? No, but that you don't, nor do you need to.
right.
The rest of your microbiome can balance it out and keep it from ever being a problem.
Mhm,
So is it work? Yes. Is it going to require discipline over the course of months? Yes.
mhm,
But is it an impossible dream? Not a chance. And there's, to your point, there's the means where they have squeezed us by their control of money to inflate away our hard work and make it more difficult to afford to take care of ourselves. And then they set up food deserts where you've got convenience stores and
mhm,
fast food as your main dining options. And so, does it sometimes require lifestyle change or sacrifice to make the changes? Yeah, sometimes it does.
mhm, mhm.
But you, and in this case, your gut, are capable of healing from those things. But you may have to develop some intestinal fortitude,
Right.
some guts, some resilience in order to go have that future.
Yeah, and I think that's the reinforcing piece as you touched on that our body is resilient. Obviously, we need to help it to recover, but it is possible. Now, you've identified a significant systemic issue, right? And as you were sharing a lot of that, there's a couple of Dostoevsky books I've read around dystopia and
Mhm.
crime and punishment, right? So in Notes from the Underground, he talks about the dystopian view and then crime and punishment, where again, the whole notion of you can commit crime, but you're not going to get away with it because you have to live with yourself, right? So it may seem, and I think for a lot of people, it's a scary thought that there is evil out there, that there are people who don't want you to do well or watch you suffer for their own personal benefit, and that could scare a lot of people, just that view. But at the end of the day, even if it's a reality and if you believe in that, they're not getting away with it in the grand scheme of things. So I just wanted to put that out there and then tie it to another thing, because one of the things I noticed, you and your team kind of present yourself as a Christian business, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So you've touched on many things, and I'm a person of faith too. And there's this whole idea of having acceptance, as you shared, and then having a purpose in life. Often for me, that's through my own faith that it allows me to have a purpose. But then I'm also able to recognize that there are a lot of forces at play, and my role potentially is to contribute to the good. And in the end, the good can be greater than the bad.
Mm.
How much of that plays into the work you guys are doing and your own views on a lot of these things you've shared, and also what you're helping people with?
Oh, great question. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah. So we, as maybe I'll tell, we don't lead with it. We're not
No.
forceful with it, but we do come from a Christian perspective, and that gives me, despite the some of the gross things I just told you about, we live with a tremendous amount of hope, largely because of what you said. Because whoever's doing this, that at the all end, they don't get away with it. There is a judgment,
Mhm,
and there is no deed that goes unseen. And we serve a God, the creator of the universe, who it is his job
mhm,
to execute the perfect line of love, justice, and mercy. I am so glad I don't have to be the one to figure that out. Like, what a hot mess if I was the one who had to arbit that or be the
mhm,
arbiter of that. So, to be able to say, the God of the universe who set this all in motion, who hatched a rescue plan to continually pursue his beloved creation, we are the apple of his eye, we are the object of his affection. And the God who started and launched that and constrained himself with this thing called free will and said, love can't be genuine without it. And so I'm going to give you the option to find out what evil really is. Sure enough, we took it. And now we know, and it's ugly. And yet, despite that, he said, I am still going to intervene in the course of human history repeatedly, and I will never stop pursuing you. Wow, I want to sign up for that.
yeah,
I want to participate in that rescue mission, and that rescue mission fills me with tremendous amounts of purpose. So my waypoint into creating breakthroughs for people is their health. And when their health is under them, it's really hard to pray. It's hard to execute your job. It's hard to be focused and present with another person if you don't feel physically well. If I can offer people that gift and they can go then use their gifting to whatever they're called to do, I've each day, whether it's my kids, my wife, my clients, the podcasts I run, the people I interview, all of the conversations I'm looking to learn something, and I'm learning to just say, it's not my job to save the world. It's just to show up and offer my best to be faithful and on mission. And there's a show, The Chosen. One of their lines is, "Our job is just to bring our loaves and fish. It's not to feed 5,000 people. God can handle the impossible, math." And I become less and less attached to how things go. I check in on the numbers because it's interesting to know what's resonating, but
mhm,
it's his job to figure out how to have the impact. And my job is just to be a participant in this.
mhm,
And I wake up each day with my tail wagging, like ready to get to the day because apparently I get another day. I'm in the fight. So sign me up for whatever's next. Yes, there's some hard things, there's some struggle, but I like who it's making me into.
mhm,
I like the way it is refining me. And it doesn't bother me that things are hard anymore. I embrace that. And I don't know, like I said earlier, being a coach or being a spouse or being a parent, it just puts in your face where your shortcomings are,
mhm,
and it's sandpaper for your rough edges. It helps you figure out where you're underdeveloped and where the coaching people puts in my face constantly. Oh, I needed to hear that.
mhm,
And when I see shortcomings in other people, I realize, oh, that's just a reflection of human nature.
mhm, mhm.
I can work on that too. And so it's really taught me a lot about who we are as people, and studying biology that doesn't change has taught me a lot about the God who made this and his intricate design. And so life is fascinating. And I think
Mhm.
every ology is just a new subcategory of theology now. It's
Yeah,
just another thing for me to study.
yeah,
And so, yeah, faith is definitely wrapped in there. And one of our calls during our coaching program is just faith over fear. You show up and we'll talk scripture and I'll pray over you. I have a master's of divinity degree, and I got shifted into health coaching for 20 years, but the minister's heart never left me. And so
Right.
that's just part of who I am and how I think.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I agree with you. I think last week I was talking to my mentor, and we were talking about how navigating difficult situations, what's helped me, and I feel like being in this position and working with people definitely helps me because I can continue to see that purpose in life. But then I'm also growing through that process. And it reminds me of an Eastern philosophy they talk about where the teacher and the student both become the teacher, right? Like the
Yeah.
master and the student become the master. And I think there's a deeper meaning there because now you're both growing together, or maybe it's a group of people that you're working with and you're all growing together. And that's really profound for me, just knowing that, right? And it sounds like that's exactly what you're sharing here. And the biggest piece, what I'm taking out from what you've shared is you're showing up and you're leading by example, right? You're not telling people to do something and then going and doing the opposite yourself. And that's
Right.
important. And then there's that metaphysical aspect of it too, right? And I've seen this where people are not living in alignment with their values, or they're not doing good for others. They're not only suffering in this world, and then there's the suffering. People of faith believe that there is that afterlife. So there is potential suffering there, but you're already paying for it in this world. So to me, that alone is often a motivator to get my act together and live in alignment with my purpose and values.
Yeah, yeah. And but the scripture Paul talks about suffering produces perseverance. You suffer long enough, you're like, I guess I must be persevering because I'm still here. Character. You start to have virtue. You start to have a backbone. You become less flappable, if you want to think of it that way. There are fewer things that ruffle your feathers, and it's harder to discourage you. And character produces hope. You know what? I think I might be able to do this. And I see the refinement that is in me, or that is, I'm not the same person I used to be. And Jim Rohn said it. He said, entrepreneurship is a self development course disguised as a way to make money.
Mhm.
And if you want to grow, sign up for something harder, sign up for a deadline, give yourself something that challenges you, invest in coaching, invest in something for people who spent years and years working out ideas so that you can have them speed up the process. That's the fun part. And I hire coaches. I love having other people look in and peek in what I'm doing because I don't know everything. And it's more fun to have somebody emotionally unattached from what I'm trying to get done that can look at it with objectivity and just point out some of my blind spots. That's fun. But yeah, it's the be willing to go work at hard things.
Mhm.
And what you're going to find is you do have what it takes. And are you perfect? No. So throw that silly standard out
Yeah.
because it's silly. It's not helping anything.
Mhm.
Progress over perfect is a good philosophy, or that silly all or nothing philosophy. The only progress you've ever made in your entire life is imperfect.
Mhm.
So go
Yeah.
make some more imperfect progress. And if you can cultivate and start to live in that mindset, let it become who you are, life gets kinder. And you look back and you're like, you know what? I have done some things. And I do have hope that if there's another hard thing, I can handle that too.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I think the biggest piece to take out from that is having that humility that you don't have all the answers and you
Yes,
are
definitely.
powerless. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck to is wanting to control everything. That how come this outcome wasn't exactly as I envisioned it to be, or the it didn't turn out as I wanted to. But sometimes you need to take that step back and believe in the process or the higher power and realize that it's probably working out a lot better than you think or
Yes.
than you thought it should, right?
Yeah.
And there's that piece there. And I think it ties back to that whole emotional and mental toxicity that we can contribute or take on if we don't have that level of humility and gratitude for everything that's happening. Now,
Mhm.
I do want to shift gears as we come to a close, but offers an opportunity for you to share with listeners some practical ways they can apply some of these things. I know we've touched on it, but again, one of the issues I see, and you touched on it a lot also, is fast food joints all around us, easily accessible, doesn't take a lot of effort. Sometimes even the cost justifies it. If you were to go buy groceries and make a healthy meal, it could be a lot more expensive than just going to McDonald's and having a couple burgers. So then how do people navigate these situations where there's incentives all around you to take on this toxicity, but what are some things people can do to make some informed choices and just be a little bit more mindful around what they're putting into their body, both from a spiritual sense, through their eyes, through their mouth, through their ears. Yeah, what are some ways they can be mindful?
Yeah, okay. On the eyes and ears and mind, I'd say that one of the most important things you can do is protect your inputs.
Mhm,
And who do you open yourself up to when you think media? That can be social or
mhm,
email or TV, whatever. But the inputs you have, are they life giving or do they leave you like emotional fast food? Do they leave you bloated? Do they leave you anxious? If you don't have good inputs, and if you, it's not just cutting off the bad ones, it's finding the ones you want to expand their influence. Like it's whether that's scripture, whether that is friends you want to try to get around to inspire you. If you don't have anyone that inspires you, you got to find different friends because you're going to become the average of who you hang out with.
mhm,
So sometimes that means hard choices and putting yourself in uncomfortable situations to find those people. You will never not desire to be with people. You'll have need to get away from them, but whatever vision you have of a brighter day, I promise there's people in that movie. You're not like, I own the world and no one's here. That's not going to be part of your story. So it's protect your inputs and find your people might be one way to say it. When it comes to what you eat and drink and maybe even breathe, a couple simple rules that might help is just you could start looking for anything that has vegetable oils in it,
mhm,
or more accurately, seed oils. If all you did was try to get seed oils out of your life, you'd basically skip everything in the middle of the grocery store. You'd never go to fast food again, and you'd have very few restaurants you could go to. So you'd have to start getting choosy. But because you're not going out to eat, and because you could buy the same amount of food typically, and make it yourself. Oh, now I have to make food and there's dishes and I got to clean it. Yeah. Welcome to personal growth. You get to figure that out. But if you just cut off vegetable oils or seed oils out of your diet, so you look at canola, grapeseed, rapeseed, cotton oil, sunflower, safflower oil. If you see these gross oils, they're rancid, deodorized oils that you can't digest and they just
mhm,
wreck your health. They're worse for you than sugar. And if I'm going to pick a second thing, look for no added sugar. There's your corn syrup, your maltodextrin, your added sugar. Fruit has sugar in it. That's fine. But
mhm,
added sugar is the problem. And if you're eating things that have seed oils and sugar, you are poisoning yourself and cut those two out and you probably lose a ton of weight
mhm.
just with those two.
Yeah.
So there's more I could give you, but that'd be if you're looking to major in majors, cut off the emotional toxicity. Sometimes that means people,
Mhm.
but sometimes it means your skill set is limited and you don't know how to deal with those kind of people. You can figure that out. There's plenty of mentors out there who can help you with that. But if you can cut off the genuinely toxic, psychopathic people, narcissistic people, and you can expand your network, and then you can cut off the poisonous in your food, whew, you could live a very different life.
Yeah, just to build on that, just some things that have come to the forefront also, perhaps easy choices around scented products
There you go. Yeah.
for like even face creams or deodorants and like stuff that you put on your body that's scented, like that all gets absorbed. So
Yep.
yeah, stuff like that as well. I would,
Yeah. All the scented candles people have in their homes, the Glade plugins. Ugh, get that. You're poisoning yourself. Stop it. You didn't know until now. So now you do. Be
yeah,
responsible with the information you have.
yeah. And then one last thing, and this might be triggering for people, or maybe not, but we talked about toxins, emotional and mental as well. But how about social media? What are your thoughts around that? I know you touched on it, being aware of
Mhm.
the influence, but it's just in your face, right? The algorithms are designed to keep giving you information that maybe you're looking up. A lot of people do end up feeling empty or there's a void when they go on. Is there an aspect, do you think, where you can have a healthy balance with it?
That does anything other than leave them feeling insecure, inadequate, bloated,
Hmm.
defeated, whatever. And so you might look at what itch am I actually trying to scratch
Hmm.
when I engage in this? Is social media it should say social media fast food would be a more accurate. It's not satisfying and it's largely toxic. And so it's most of the time, like I personally, I have an allergy to social media. I don't want much of anything to do with it. And so I blog and I podcast and I write articles and interview people. Like to me, that's my contribution. And my wife handles, she has less of an allergy than I do. But that part of, if we actually built our own app because we wanted to have people exist in a digital ecosystem without all the creepy tracking tech and the data mining and the trolls and all that garbage that gets mixed into it. So we just said, let's screw that. Let's build one. And
Hmm.
once you understand, if you haven't seen the movie The Social Dilemma, let's start
Hmm.
there. If you don't understand This isn't child's play. They are literally manipulating you. The news feed they get in Portland is very different than the one they get in Heartland or in Florida. It's so different. And they are sending you information to train you to think a particular way, and it is very systematic, and they want all of us to believe the same thing. So they got to speak to the Republicans this way and the Democrats this way and the independents this way. But there's so much theater and weaponization and curated content in there, and I promise you big data is not looking out for you.
Mhm.
And every time you update your phone, you're giving them more permission to track everything you're doing. So if you can just, again, it's back to that conversation about evil, and people really do that. Yeah, that's how they think. And
Mhm.
that's their delight to manipulate you and see what they can do. So if you understand that's what you're engaging,
Right.
and you can almost see it as a battleground, then yeah, then go in there and get out. But don't put your existence in there and all of your most precious thoughts and information. That's just being weaponized, and you're probably interacting with bots anyway.
Mhm.
So who knows what's actually there?
Yeah.
So that's a if you have the sanity check on what it is, and that it's part of the ministry of truth or the censorship brotherhood, if you want to think of it that way, then you just accept it for what it is. That's what that is. Okay. Then what would be a healthy way to engage or disengage that? And for some people, it's really tough because their business is tied to it. I just am determined to build a business that does not rely upon that
Right.
because they have the off switch and they can turn you off anytime they want.
Mhm.
I don't want to be part of that. I'd rather build a business that doesn't have all the kill switches
Mhm.
and hoops I have to jump through. Oh, shoot, I can't say that here. Oh, delete. Like, no, I'd rather just be able to speak freely. So that's part of my allergy or response to your
Yeah, no,
question,
I
social media.
agree. I agree with you because they've created a sense of dependence that, hey, in order to succeed, if you're an entrepreneur, if you have a business, this is what you need to use. And then to your
Yeah,
point, your data is being sold, but at the same time, there is a lot of monetization behind it. If they create a customer profile based on who you are, then they know what to feed you for you
yeah,
and be a consumer. So
yeah,
there is that manipulation, but then they're also extracting value from your dependence on them and your choices as a consumer. And when you
yeah,
start thinking about it that way, that's when it gets scary that you're not even a conscious free agent making choices, right? So,
yeah, yeah. Watch the movie The Social Dilemma. The people who created the platforms won't let their kids use it.
right.
What does that tell you? Yeah.
No, I appreciate all the knowledge, Christian. Thank you so much for coming on here and sharing so much insight and wisdom with us today. I do want to give you an opportunity to share with the listeners if there's ways they can find you or get in touch with you if they wanted to learn more about your work, if they wanted to work with you directly, what are some ways they can do that?
Thank you very much. Yes. So if you're interested in the work we do, you can check out the website healingunited.today. So .today instead of .com. We wanted a sense of urgency right in our URL. So go to healingunited.today. You can check out our detox programs. We've got an accelerated 8-week detox. We got a 16-week mind and body cleanse. And then we have a year-long immersion program for people interested in that. But if you remember nothing else from this episode and anything I said sounded interesting, you can just click the request a consultation button there. We have a free 45-minute consultation. We just talk about you, your health situation, where you are, what you want to overcome, and it's open to anybody. So if that's interesting to you, you can check that out. And you can find my blog is Deconstructing Conventional. If you want to check me out and hear more of what I have to say, then you can find me there.
All right. Thank you again, Christian. This was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It's been a fun conversation.